July is going to be a month of navigation for the Pittsburgh Pirates. I'm going to tell you why on today's episode of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates from a lifelong fan to lifelong fans. Today's episode is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Make sure you go to taxnetworkusa.com/lockedon or call 1-800-549-1000 right now to take care of all of your tax problems, because Tax Network USA is always going to be in your corner. So the weekend series is done. Bucko Luau weekend is done and dusted. Everything about it is gone. The Mets series is gone. The Pirates, of course, split a very frustrating series with the New York Mets over the weekend and through today, recording just a little bit after the game today. The Pirates, of course, win 8-2, having a very big sixth inning today against the New York Mets to at least salvage a split and get back to 4 games under 500 at 43-47 on the season, trailing the San Diego Padres by 4 games for the final wild card spot. And we'll get a little bit into that later when we talk about the trade deadline and how it's looming, what the Pirates could do, the potential targets they could have, and how they will manage it. We'll also talk about Paul Skenes and Bryan Reynolds getting their All-Star nods and why Paul Skenes should start the All-Star game for the National League. But right now, it's July 8th, and the month just started, but it's been a jam-packed month in terms of things we've already kind of seen for this Pittsburgh Pirates team. Jared Jones, after not pitching in over a week, has a pretty solid outing, ends up having to leave the game rather early for what I thought, and then we find out that it was a lat strain, the same thing that Quinn Priester is dealing with, and you'll probably hear that name in a minute, Quinn Priester, that is. But Jared Jones is on the 15-day IL. It was announced that he would not be pitching for a good bit. It's going to probably be about 2 or 3 weeks before he even starts throwing again. So the next time you'll see Jared Jones, the calendar will have shifted to August at the earliest. That's when we'll see Jared Jones. And then to top it all off, on Saturday at the game that I was at, Bailey Falter leaves the game early and has an injury. So he is now on the 15-day injured list also. So that has created something very interesting that this Pirates team really hasn't had to deal with all that much this year, which is starting pitching injuries. Now, when you say that and say, well, they've had some injuries, yes, they have. We've seen Martin Perez be out for a month. We've seen Marco Gonzalez be out for extended time. We've seen the aforementioned Quinn Priester be out for extended time. And now Bailey Falter and Jared Jones are out. But for the most part, this has been a relatively healthy unit. Mitch Keller has stayed healthy. Paul Skenes has stayed healthy. Bailey Falter, up to this point, has stayed healthy. So you've been seeing health be a very good component of this starting rotation, which, mind you, is one of the best in Major League Baseball right now. And it makes it even more frustrating as to where the Pirates are at this current moment with the rotation that they have. But now that you're losing Jared Jones and Bailey Falter, of course, Jared Jones is going to be out a lot longer than Bailey Falter, but you're going to have to find a way to navigate this. And that's why this entire month, on top of what they were already going to be having to deal with in a couple weeks when it comes to the trade deadline, it's going to be a month of navigation. And yes, it's a little bit of a pun since this is the Pirates, of course, but they're going to be navigating this month in a lot of different ways. And it starts with figuring out how they're going to navigate this starting rotation. Half of the problem, I think, is already fixed, because on Sunday we saw Luis Ortiz once again just look really good as a starting pitching option, going 6 innings in the game on Sunday. Despite the loss for the Pirates, Ortiz looked great. I mean, you cannot understate what Luis Ortiz has done for this team this year. He's been one of the better stories that we've really seen from this Pittsburgh Pirates team throughout the season, starting the year as a reliever, being asked to start every once in a while. You obviously had the Carmen Mlodzinski opening games where Ortiz would then go about 3 or 4 innings after that. So he was practically starting, just not doing the first inning. Now they've shifted him into kind of this journeyman role where he's went from 2022, where he was an amazing prospect and debuted, to 2023 when his velocity fell off a cliff and he couldn't throw a strike to save his life, to now striking guys out again like he was in 2022, while also cutting out everything that you've seen in terms of walks. He's been very good at not allowing guys to get on base via the free pass. He has shown really good command. He's added a cutter to his mix to now have 3 fastballs, the sinker, the fastball, and the cutter, all kind of working in tandem together very well for Ortiz. So he's pretty much already answered half the problem that you're going to have figuring out this rotation and figuring out how things are going to really gel together while Bailey Falter and Jared Jones are out. The big component to this is, where does it go as far as replacing the other half? And I think that's the big question that really starts to open up a lot of different points, because one, Quinn Priester and Marco Gonzalez are both on rehab assignments with AAA Indianapolis, and both seem to be on the fast track to eventually returning to this Pittsburgh Pirates rotation. So then you almost have an abundance of starting pitchers even without having Bailey Falter and Jared Jones. So then you have to then navigate what you do when those guys come back. What do you do with Martin Perez? What do you do with Marco Gonzalez and Quinn Priester? And then I'll even throw his name out there because I think he deserves the recognition as a potential option down the line. Braxton Ashcraft has had a phenomenal season in the minor leagues for this team this year. He's done very well in Altoona. He's done very well in his 4 starts in Indianapolis so far. And I think he's only going to get better. Now, he's obviously transitioning from a relief role to a starting rotation role. So we'll kind of see how his innings are monitored throughout the year. But he could eventually be a long-term option if the Pirates do decide if they want to move on from the veterans of Martin Perez and Marco Gonzalez, which again, we'll get to more when we're talking about how the Pirates will navigate the trade deadline. But navigation is the word here, because the pitching staff has been the glue that has kept this team together. Guys like Bailey Falter, Jared Jones, Paul Skenes, Mitch Keller, even Perez, Gonzalez, and Priester in their short, really good stints have been the reason why this Pirates team is still within shouting distance of even thinking about a wild card spot and even thinking about buying at the deadline. Those are just facts. But now that you kind of see some cracks open up with the injury bug hitting the starting rotation, it really starts to move things in a certain way where the Pirates have to think about these things, but they have something that every single team before a season cherishes and really wants to have through 162 games, and that is pitching options. They have plenty of options. I mean, if you just assumed that all these guys are healthy, you're looking at Jones, Skenes, Keller, Falter, Perez, Gonzalez, Priester, and eventually Braxton Ashcraft as all options that you could have in this starting rotation, including Luis Ortiz. And then you'll see a piece that I have on Steel City Pirates that'll probably be coming out later today on Bubba Chandler even being an option for this team around September call-ups time as a guy that can slot into this starting rotation and do some very good things. Now, these are all great things, and we know that these are not going to be big components as to what the Pirates need to do moving forward, because the starting pitching staff has just been this good. It has, again, been the reason why this Pirates team has not fallen off a cliff just yet, and that is a very, very good thing, because now when you're going into the trade deadline and you're wondering how you're going to navigate the trade deadline, you have clear and concise needs, and you also have those clear and concise needs on one side of the game. And that's the offensive side of the game. And that's the very good part about all this now, is that even with these injuries and having to navigate them, the Pirates still have very reliable options that they can throw in the rotation without having to do these pesky bullpen games that they had to do earlier in the season. They don't have to really worry about those that much anymore. And even if they do, you do have some options even in the bullpen now that you could use as openers, like Carmen Mlodzinski, who's looked good, like Kyle Nicholas, who's shown you he can go multiple innings and look reliable. Dennis Santana has even had some pretty good spurts where he's looked like a very good reliever. And then Bednar is going to be coming back at some point. Baracki's going to be back at some point. So although health seems like a concern right now, it's not as big a concern because of the options that the Pirates currently have at their disposal to navigate these pitching injuries that came their way over the weekend. Now, shifting away from pitching because it's not going to be that much of a big deal come deadline time. How do the Pirates navigate and manage the trade deadline? What needs to be done for us as fans and the team to have confidence moving forward? And who are some potential targets that the Pirates could look at when the trade deadline approaches? We'll discuss in a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100 because you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Prize Picks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. You can bet on Bryan Reynolds, Mitch Keller, O'Neal Cruz, Paul Skenes, all of your favorite Pirates players, because all you're doing is playing against the numbers. You're not playing against anything else. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. Today's episode is brought to you by Tax Network USA, because here on Locked On Pirates, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garner your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. So don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. So call 1-800-549-1000 or visit taxnetworkusa.com/lockedon and be sure to mention Locked On Pirates at checkout and you'll receive a $250 discount on all the services that Tax Network USA has to offer. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. After you check out this episode of Locked On Pirates, make sure you check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel here on the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing you all of your sports news every single day from the local host of Locked On, like myself. Of course, on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV, and it is free and available to you just like this podcast is every single day. Now, as far as navigating the month of July is concerned, and this is a thing for all 30 teams, the biggest happenings of July, of course, are the trade deadline, the All-Star break, and, of course, the MLB draft. On top of all that, you got the trade deadline, too, and that's usually where you see teams that want to buy, get those under the radar pieces or get that super big name, or the teams on the fringe go get those under the radar guys or a big name that you didn't expect them to get to kind of catapult themselves into playoff positioning. And then you have teams that want to sell that you look at and say, okay, it's time for them to continue their rebuild. They're going to go find some prospects and some pieces that can eventually be major components to what they want to do down the line. Now, this is a trade deadline that is very interesting because this is a trade deadline that you don't really have that marquee name involved in trade talks this year. There's no Juan Soto. There's no Max Scherzer or Jacob deGrom or Justin Verlander or any real big name like that has been, in fact, guaranteed to be traded. Now, there are names out there like Jazz Chisholm Jr., Garrett Crochet, Luis Robert Jr., Vladimir Guerrero Jr. There's a lot of different names out there that are going to be very intriguing options, maybe even a Bo Bichette, depending on how things shape out over the next couple of weeks, because there is a lot to still be done. We still have a whole week, because by this time next week, it'll be the All-Star break before these teams can really sit down for a couple days and evaluate what is going on and how they're going to attack the trade deadline. And right now, there are only 5 teams in Major League Baseball that are double-digit games out of the playoffs in terms of the wild card, those being the White Sox, the Angels, the Athletics, the Marlins, and the Rockies. What I found even more intriguing when I was looking at this is that there is no team right now in Major League Baseball that has a double-digit lead in their division. Every single division is at least a little bit tight. Things have been getting a little bit tighter now after some of those teams that got off to really hot starts have slowed down, and some teams that got off to really slow starts have sped up. So you have 25 teams realistically right now that can say all it takes is for us to go on a 5-game win streak and our season changes. All it takes for us is to go on a 5-game losing streak and our season changes. So you have to think that the Pirates, of being one of those 25 teams, are a team that is thinking that way. So how do they plan on attacking the deadline? That is the biggest question, because this is a deadline for the Pirates that I feel like is something we haven't seen since 2018. When they went out and got Chris Archer, had their first winning record since 2015. And ironically, it's the last time they bought at the deadline, and it's the last time that they had a winning record, albeit it was 82-79. That's still a winning record in the record books. So I do expect the Pirates to be buyers at this deadline. I think everybody should expect that, and I think it should be an expectation amongst the entire community. It should be an expectation amongst the front office, the players, the staff, everybody. Now, over the next week, the Pirates have a chance to put themselves in a lot better positioning, obviously with 3 games against their division rivals, the Milwaukee Brewers, and then 3 games against the selling Chicago White Sox, who are among the worst teams in all of baseball. So the Pirates have a chance to kind of change the landscape a little bit before they go into the All-Star break and come out of it facing the Philadelphia Phillies on the following weekend. And then even after that, you still have about 2.5 weeks before the deadline on July 31st. But we kind of know already what the Pirates need. They need another outfielder. Bryan Reynolds, who, of course, we'll talk about in the final part of this show, has been phenomenal for this Pirates team. He ranks highly in almost every statistical category hitting-wise for outfielders in the National League. He has been absolutely on fire since the beginning of June, and is just their best player. It's offensively. It's just not even close. They need another outfielder, though. Sawinski has done well. I won't say well. He's done better a lot as of late. Michael A. Taylor's not going to really do much for you. And Jack Sawinski, when I say he's done better as of late, still isn't where we want him to be. And then you have Edward Olivares, who just doesn't get a lot of playing time. Joshua Palacios isn't going to move the needle. And Connor Joe's needed at first base when Rowdy needs to platoon against left-handed pitching. So they need a corner outfielder. So you look at names like Brent Rooker. You look at Randy Arozarena. You look at potentially a Taylor Ward from the Los Angeles Angels. You look at some of these guys and you kind of go down a peg, because I don't expect the Pirates to go out and get a Vlad Jr. or a Jazz Chisholm or a Luis Robert Jr., a name of that caliber. But I could expect them to go after a guy like a Brent Rooker, who to the general baseball community may not be that well known of a name, but still a guy that has done absolutely great this season for Oakland. He's doing better than the team is performing. You also look at a guy at Ryan McMahon, who would fit a lot of different things the Pirates need. Left-handed power. They need probably another guy in the middle infield or at first base if they really decided they wanted to go do it, but they desperately need left-handed power. You could find that. You have Brent Rooker. You have Ryan McMahon. A JJ Bleday could be a guy like that. You look at Jesse Winker as another potential outfield option. But we know that they need these things. You could even go and get another catcher if you wanted to, and Elias Diaz to really supplant that position, because the catcher position has been terrible for this Pittsburgh Pirates team this year. But you could also see the Pirates move on from some of these expiring contracts and veterans like Aroldis Chapman and Martin Perez and Marco Gonzalez, because they can, if health permits. Because as I mentioned earlier, they have the pitching options right now to make it through the season and work things out, even if they trade Martin Perez and Marco Gonzalez, because that still leaves Ortiz, that still leaves Falter, that still leaves Jones, and that still leaves Quid Priester. So you still have a plethora of reliable options and can get something for those guys. Aroldis Chapman on a 1 year, $10.5 million deal. He's a guy that you can move to another team if they are interested and get something for. So the Pirates can play this in a lot of different ways, because they could sell off pieces they can feel comfortable selling off while also still being a buying team and getting things that they absolutely need. Now, do these things move the needle and force you to have confidence moving forward? That's up to the eye. That's up to you. And you don't ever really know how these deadline deals work out, at least for the team that's buying, until October. If they're playing October baseball and then one of those acquisitions they got is a big reason why, then you could say that's a win. If they don't, you could say it's a loss, depending on how the prospects that they send away perform. But we know the Pirates have the farm system to make really any trade happen. It's just a matter of how high up the ladder do they want to go get what they need. They need an outfielder. They need a left-handed power bat. They can find that in one player. That would be great. If they don't, they can always go out and get other guys. So read that piece I'll have at Steel City Pirates when it comes out about the trade targets, and it's kind of a primer, because the Pirates have a lot of different options that can be available despite not a lot of teams selling, because the market's always there during the trade deadline. But expect this team to be buyers. It just depends on how much buying they want to do. I think that is the big component that you can take away from this. And when you have a player like Paul Skenes and a player like Bryan Reynolds, it's kind of hard not to buy into it when you're only 4 games out of the wild card. We'll talk about why Paul Skenes and Bryan Reynolds got all-star nods, acknowledging the great first halves that they've had, and why Paul Skenes starting the all-star game would be good for baseball. We're going to discuss all that on the final part of today's episode, Locked On Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports, and I love them so much that I never want them to stop. The NBA and the NHL are gone, though, and that means the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want and whenever you want. All we have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime we're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer, betting on players like Bryan Reynolds, Paul Skenes, O'Neal Cruz, Brian Hayes, and so much more, because FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the Locked On Pirates podcast, as you always do here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. And your Pittsburgh Pirates are going to be represented well in the MLB All-Star game in Arlington, Texas next week. I was going to say a few weeks, but time's moving really fast, as Bryan Reynolds and Paul Skenes were selected as the Pittsburgh Pirates All-Star selections for the 2024 All-Star game. We'll start with Reynolds. What a year Bryan Reynolds has really had. He got the contract extension last year on a very affordable contract for a player of his caliber. I mean, right now, folks, an 822 OPS and 363 at-bats, 16 home runs, 54 RBIs, on pace for a 30 home run season. Over the last 30 games, he has a slugging of .607 with 8 home runs and 22 RBIs. Bryan Reynolds has been unstoppable. He's one of the best outfielders in the National League, one of the best outfielders in all of baseball over the past month and a half, and absolutely deserves to be in the All-Star game and having a season that's very comparable to the last time that he made the All-Star game, which was, of course, was in 2021. So congratulations to Bryan Reynolds on making the All-Star game, his second of his career and likely not his last if he continues to play like he is right now. Where the history was made as far as the Pittsburgh Pirates and the All-Star game are concerned was, of course, Paul Skenes being named to the All-Star team just a year after being drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates #1 overall in the 2023 MLB first-year player draft. Paul Skenes becomes the first player in MLB history to be selected #1 overall and make the MLB All-Star game the following season. Now, we've already heard so much about Paul Skenes. We've heard the greatness of Paul Skenes already on display. We've seen it on display. We see what he does every single outing since he debuted on May 11th. You could go on and on about it for an hour and a half. For baseball, and as Major League Baseball is concerned, the MLB All-Star game is a game that showcases the best talent across the league for everybody to see on a national audience, and it also puts eyes on guys that may not have them on them all the time. The Pittsburgh Pirates are not a team you're going to see on national TV at all, really, this season, because, truthfully, networks didn't know what was going on with Paul Skenes. I would say and argue going into the next couple years, you'll probably see a lot more games on television with Paul Skenes starting, just because he brings that kind of generation of excitement and impact and aura to himself. And for Major League Baseball, it would be a disservice not to have him start the All-Star game for the National League for a plethora of reasons. One, Paul Skenes is your top young star in Major League Baseball right now. He is a generational pitching talent that we have not seen really ever do the things he's doing before. He's been compared to Steven Strasburg to no end at this point with how good he is and what he does on the mound day in and day out, or every 5 days, not day in and day out. Wish it was day in and day out, but every 5 days. Having him go against the top of the order in the first inning against the American League would be must-watch television. Watching him face guys like Aaron Judge, watching him face guys like Yordan Alvarez, watching him face guys like Bobby Witt Jr. or Gunnar Henderson. I mean, these are things that are just slam dunk must-watch television. So having Paul Skenes start in the All-Star game should be a no-brainer. Let him throw the first inning and then get him out of there, because I don't want to see him pitch more than that. But let him showcase his stuff on a national stage in front of a national audience and let him go to work against the MLB's best players. Because and we're Pirates fans, we're going to be biased, but from an unbiased standpoint, I would want to see Paul Skenes face Aaron Judge. I'd want to see him face Yordan Alvarez. And especially, I'd want to see him face Gunnar Henderson, who is one of the top young players in Major League Baseball right now for the Baltimore Orioles. So make sure this happens, because how many times are you going to get to see it? You don't know that, especially against the American League, where the Pirates only see these teams once. They only see these teams once every year, albeit they play them every year. We wouldn't have the opportunity to see Paul Skenes versus Aaron Judge again until the last series of the season. So if you have the golden opportunity to do it, let him go out there, tote the rubber as the starter in the MLB All-Star game, because it is a slam dunk for TV. It is must-watch television, and Paul Skenes brings the crowd with him. So let him do it. Congratulations to Paul Skenes and Bryan Reynolds on making the All-Star game. And folks, thank you for watching another episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Find this show on YouTube and all of your audio platforms, because it is free and available to you every Monday through Friday. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday evening, folks. We'll see you tomorrow to preview the Brewer series and talk more about this Pittsburgh Pirates team. But until then, see you on the flip side.